If you tuned into Joe Rogan this week, you heard him talking to Greg Overton. Now, we don't have Greg Overton on the podcast yet, but he talks about listening to Greg Overton on another podcast. Well, we've got the host of that podcast, my friend Justin Jones, on the Manlihood ManCast. So we're going to get into it right after this.
Are you in need of marketing help for your business or nonprofit? Do you have a company or organization that is thinking about hiring an in-house staff person to do your marketing, but realizing it's out of the budget to bring on someone with the right skills and experience?
If you need an expert to help you with any of the following:
social media, graphic design, website design, web hosting, public relations, video production, podcast editing, short-form video editing, email marketing, search engine optimization, content marketing, grant writing.
Grand River Agency is here to help you amplify your message and get it in front of the right people.
Visit us on the web at grandriver.agency.
Men, your journey to becoming a better man starts today. Grab a hold of what matters and make it count. Welcome to the Manlihood ManCast with Josh Hadger.
Brothers, thank you for tuning into the Manlihood ManCast. Listen, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. We had to reset our Apple Podcasts feed. So I want you to go. What happened is it deleted all of our reviews and our ratings. So we're kind of starting from scratch with our Apple Podcast feeds. So I want you all to go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review, so that we can let everybody know that this is an awesome podcast, and then more people will see it and find it and appreciate the work we're doing here at Manlihood. So please go check that out. Guys, today's guest, Justin Jones, is the host of the Curious Jones podcast. He grew up here in this small town that I live in Bradford, PA, and he's living in Pittsburgh, and he's doing some fantastic work. And like I mentioned in the intro to this show, Joe Rogan listens to his podcast. Somebody commented one day on one of his videos that he's like the poor man's Joe Rogan, which I think is hilarious, and I love to tease him about it. But Justin and I have kind of become friends, and I really appreciate this dude, and we had a great conversation. Justin, how you doing, man? You doing good?
I'm doing well, Josh. Thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, it's great to have you back on the Manlihood ManCast. It's funny, you timed that sip of water just perfectly, so just before the recording stopped. And I was hoping you were still drinking it when we started, so I could say this episode of the Manlihood ManCast is brought to you by water.
Which, by the way, I'm kind of torn because my wife put in front of me a number of studies about plastic bottles, which I always knew were kind of bad, but I guess there's even more small matter particulates or whatever the heck they call it in bottled water, which I'm sure they have never done tests on to figure out what that does, and probably has something to do with why a lot of people are dying of cancer compared to way back in the day. But the cool thing, I guess, to turn a downer into a positive is Deer Park is what I do drink when I drink it out of a bottle. And I always find it really interesting that the third bullet, proudly sourced from Frontier Springs in Foster Township, Pennsylvania.
Really?
Yeah. So
That's
I'm not sure
cool.
exactly where. I want to find out where in Foster Township they're sourcing their well water from, because that would be horrible if they're lying, which I can't imagine that they are. But at least I know it's like local. It's not like getting shipped here from California sitting in the back of a truck, which is kind of cool. But
Yeah, well, you talked about the whole the particulates and the problems with it. Like, think about how much, like, 100 years ago, they died of other stuff, right?
Yeah.
But, the water just came out of the ground, and they drank it out of a bucket, you know what I mean? Or out of glass, or lead pipes, which had its own issues. But I frequently think about this because I had a guest on the show recently, and we talked about endocrine disruptors, Have you done any of the research on any of that?
I haven't myself like gone deep into it, but I know enough from hearing podcasts where people have talked about is it phthalates, right? That really start to impact. Like I know that they've noted there's like a considerable difference in testosterone in young men, if I'm not mistaken, over the course of like long term. And they have different ways that they can actually measure the impact of those phthalates on the human body. Am I right?
Yeah. And he's saying that the plastics, the way it leaches into the food, some of the food itself, the hormones that they use to treat the animals, all of it together has drastically reduced across the board testosterone levels in men, and also created havoc on estrogen levels in women because they're not operating the way that they're supposed to as well. Like women have estrogen and testosterone, and men have similar hormones, but they're in certain balances. So it's just a really, interesting thing as we're sitting here talking about manlyhood and masculinity and, what it means to be a man in our culture today on this podcast. And, we're drinking water out of plastic bottles that are completely changing what it means to operate out of your hormone levels,
Yeah, no, we try to do as much as we can. Like we got away from plastic baggies. We use like silicone, reusable things for our kids when they go to school, because of those forever chemicals. And like, then I read how much, and it makes sense. It's funny. We're willfully ignorant, I think, in a lot of cases where, like paper towels, I'm notorious for like wasting paper towels to wipe up everything and like just wait, new paper towel. Feel a paper towel. It's treated with chemicals to help make it more absorbent, right? What are those chemicals doing when you're wiping down your countertop and then making a sandwich, or, putting an apple down and eating it, and, probably once, twice, 3 times, but I mean, there are probably people who have some weird random cancer or disease that they can't for the life of them figure out. They don't have genetic precursors. It's very rare and strange. But if they were able to realize that like they wipe down a counter with a certain paper towel or with a certain cleaner, and they make their sandwich there every day without putting anything down on the counter, and that's why they've developed a cancer. I'm sure whether it's like, that's probably not that specific example, but something like that accounts for a lot of stuff. So like, I used to think people were crazy, Josh, but I've become this person where, and I think it goes into manlyhood and being what a man is so much and so broad, but I think it's being a provider. It's being somebody who is a thought leader, not a know-it-all in everything, but somebody who's willing to, not just be a sheep, for lack of a better term, right? And I'm starting to really lean into, the same way that I've done with physical fitness, right? It's the same principles. Once you know something broadly, you see it in all things. And if you do start to eat clean, grass-fed, organic type meats, and you eat vegetables that where they're grown instead of mass agriculture that's sprayed with chemicals, you will make a difference in your overall health. You just have to be consistent, and you can't just pick and choose. You have to live by some sets of principles, and you have to make decisions sometimes that you don't really want to make if you truly do want to have the best interest of yourself and your family. That might be harsh to some people, but I think you're not doing yourself or them any justice if you just kind of pick and choose because you don't have the discipline to see it through. And I don't think that that's being over the top. I think it's just being realistic.
Yeah, I think the willfully ignorant part, dude, we totally do that because we're like, I don't want to know about this because then I have to change.
Right.
We used to raise meat rabbits and chickens in the backyard. So we'd have eggs and we'd have meat chickens, and I'd do a lot of the processing myself. And I remember sometime somebody said, well, why don't you just get your meat at the store like everybody else? It's like, yeah, okay, I could get my chicken from the store. People don't even understand now, like your chicken that you get at the store, the chickens are usually raised in America and then sent on a boat to China to be processed and then sent back. Like, hello, like, how crazy is that? Because people here don't want those jobs anymore. And they found that it was cheaper to get it done by doing it that way. Are we just literally trusting our entire, it's the same with pigs. Like, I don't know if you remember this, but during 2020, when the whole world went crazy, China bought, a Chinese corporation bought Smithfield, like the pork processing company, and just moved like a whole bunch of their operations over to China.
I didn't know that specifically. I knew that they were investing in a lot of farmland and agriculture, and it's smart. It makes sense. But it's also easy for me to sit here and preach and say, it's not as easy as it sounds to like have access. But I also think it's not as hard. There's a lot of people who throw up the excuse that eating healthy is more expensive, it's difficult, which can be true, but doesn't have to be true. And it's the easy excuse for lazy people who want to complain about the system that they're in, but who are actually a part of the system. They're literally driving the system forward as opposed to fighting against it. They just have a big voice that they kind of throw out there and prophesize that like there's a problem here, right? And it's like, okay, well, put your money where your mouth is, and what are you going to throw into the mix here to, try to help change things?
Yeah, well, that's the truth. If we all stopped buying the food, then the market would not be providing that food that's bad for us or whatever, whether it's chemically laced paper towels or whatever. We're contributing to the problem because we keep doing it.
Yeah. Have you ever looked at like ingredient lists? Heinz ketchups is one. If you look at the ingredients in Heinz ketchup I'm thinking even like Great Britain, if you just look in Europe, it's like 3 or 4 ingredients. It's like salt, water, tomato, and something else. If you look at it in America, it's like 30 ingredients long. It's a bunch of artificial stuff. And then to take it a layer further, they sell it in glass bottles in Europe. They sell it in plastic in the United States. And it's probably more expensive. I don't know the economics behind it, but they have a level of standard and realistic, they've done the right type of research, unbiased, it seems. And I'm sure they're not perfect over there either, but it's obvious, right? Like, how it's not the same ingredients? Like, what do you mean?
So I wonder if, and this is just me wondering, because I've seen that and I've thought the same exact thing. And then I got to wondering this question. Is it because in England, they don't have to put everything on the label? Or is it because in England, they're not allowed to put it in the food? If it's the latter, that's much better than, maybe they don't have to disclose everything in it.
It's a fair point, right?
I have to do more research to know for sure, but
yeah, no, that's a good point. See, I jumped to the conclusion that people are horrible and that we're doing bad things, but I think it's a good point. But at the end of the day, either way, something's going on.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, I don't know if you remember this, but everything was in glass bottles when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. And then they started doing plastic because it was better for the environment because you could recycle it easier, they said. And then come to find out, like, half of the plastic that they make the stuff in, you can't actually recycle anyway, and it still ends up in the landfill. Mm-hmm. So there was a whole big thing recently where all that, they actually were tracking the plastic to see where it goes. And like, those little numbers on the bottom, and most of the plastic that our consumer goods come in, they can't even recycle it anyway. So it just goes back in the landfill. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah.
And I've also seen some pretty cool stuff where there are people taking that plastic and actually turning it into fuel. It takes some energy to do it, but I don't know, kind of a neat concept. You can, without doing a whole lot of pollution, they can break it down and turn that plastic back into oil, to the petroleum from whence it came and make it a fuel that they can use for heating or whatever. I'm like, I mean, I don't have the time to build a plastic digester in the backyard.
Yeah, right. Now I mean, kudos to whoever does, and that's pretty cool. There's a kid that put together a project to go clean up plastic in the ocean.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know whatever happened with that. I'm sure he's probably still doing it, but there needs to be a few of those people in the world with enough ingenuity and enough determination to actually see it through.
Yeah. You know, and it's funny because it's like, this has become a political paradigm, right? Right versus left. And they try to say the left or the environmentalist, and the right is, you know, not environmentalist. And there's 1,000 reasons why they usually say that paradigm. But I think 99% of the people on the planet, if you talk to them, all want cleaner air and less pollution. And they don't want plastics. And you know what I mean? They don't want those things out there. You know, they want to see a more sustainable thing, whether or not they agree in climate change or whatever narrative is being pushed. I think we all pretty much want a cleaner world, right? So what's the big deal about that? Let's make that happen, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I was having a conversation in a different, I guess on a whole different topic, but it was in the same vein. We all think about things from an idealistic standpoint. At least most people I know do, right? What I see, though, is then there's people who get caught up and who really struggle and have a lot of anxiety in life, are people who have this idealistic vision and can't migrate away from that. Their expectation is then around that idealistic thought. And then there's people who have the ability to have this idealistic vision to drive them in a certain direction, but who have more of a realistic understanding that there has to be puts and takes, and every war has some dead soldiers. And once you realize that, it gets really cool, because then you can start to get strategic about what things you are sacrificing, because that can be very powerful and very valuable for you in what you're trying to accomplish. But if you come into it idealistic, and you're idealistic that nothing bad can happen, then when something bad happens, you react to it in a negative way, as opposed to using what you kind of already know is going to happen. It's a part of the process, and then use that as a positive piece of your plan. That to me was like a pivotal part of my life. Like when I used to get, because I was insecure, right? I think that comes down to it, right? You're either secure or you're not. And when you're insecure, then you don't make the right decisions. And I would make decisions that were like, oh my God, this isn't working. What am I going to do? How do I make this not look bad? Or how do I change that? Instead of like, just go into it knowing that you're going to have 7 out of the 10 things that you want maybe end up going slightly the way that you'd like, and that 3 things are going to blow up, and that's okay. And start building a plan around it.
Yeah. That idealistic mindset, that concept, like we do that all the time, where we're like, oh yeah, well, I'm just going to save the world.
People get heartbroken because they get dead set on that.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that I kind of love about, I kind of love watching, and this is like that, you know how like people rubberneck at a car wreck when they drive by to see what's going on, like, oh, like I love kind of watching the way that the idealistic people, when their world falls apart, if that makes any sense, when like they're all about, making sure for just an example, like I want to see equality for everybody until it means equality for, a straight white male, or I want to see, or whatever their issue or whatever the thing. And so I don't know, man, like, I think you're right. Like, how about we focus on, what are you passionate about? What are you good at? What difference do you want to make in the world? Focus on that one thing, and let the other people focus on the other things, and let's see where it goes, And I think if everybody focused on their area,
Well, that's what leads to, I think, the other key to life, which is once you have a purpose, then things are really clear for you. You know, I realized that once I had kids, I kind of started to put together what my real purpose was. And before I had kids, I wanted to do everything that was thrown at me. And either maybe good fortune or bad fortune, I had a lot of fortune to be able to do a lot of things and have a lot of great opportunities. And that meant that I was so spread thin, and a lot of the people that I cared about that were supporting me weren't getting the attention that I needed. Right. And so when you have kids, you kind of realize like, okay, that's not possible. You start to rethink about the way you look at the world. At least for me, it was kids. Right. And now I have no problem saying no to things that really don't benefit where I want to go in life. But now I look back, and I didn't know it at the time. It's just, I didn't know where I wanted to go in life. So I looked at every opportunity to do something as maybe going to be the place where I uncover actually what I wanted to do. And so to me, that's both a good message for young people who are not sure, right? Like I have 3 younger brothers, and you know, they're all at different stages of their lives. And it's like, hey, look, I'm 37. I just turned 37, which makes me feel old. And that might be relative to other people, but you know, for me, I see them doing things and I'm like, man, 10 years ago, what I was thinking about, I was in the right direction, but man, like it's night and day from where I'm at today, what I care about, where my mind is, where my focus is, the things that I'm doing. And I'm sure that in 10 years from now, if I continue to keep this way of thinking, I'll look at myself at 47 and be like, wow, 37-year-old me, what an idiot. Like I still was looking at things so small and not big enough. That's at least been the trend. And I don't think that there's a wall where you hit, where you stop being able to overshoot what your expectations are of yourself. I think a lot of people give up on that, and they shouldn't, right? Because it is that chase, it's that pursuit that I think fulfills everything. It makes everything fun and enjoyable and just more clear.
Yeah, especially when you center it around purpose. And you're right, man, dude, having a family, that gives you an easy excuse to say no. And then you realize no is what you should be saying all along.
Right. Yes.
And the more you say no, the easier it gets to say it, right?
It kind of becomes fun.
Yeah. Sorry, man, that's not for me. So you talk about, you know, what you're talking, that progression that you talk about is really maturity. You know, we start young and we are idealistic, or we're, you know, and idealistic and irresponsible, and we're going to change the world and do all the things. And then we actually find what our purpose is. And then, you know, I've talked to, I have a bunch of old guys that are my friends, and I spend time with them. And it's funny how they warned me about this, and I didn't see it right away. Like they're like, okay, so right now you're focused on your purpose and trying to understand that and live that out. But here really soon, you're going to start to focus on your regrets and all the things you missed. And then you're going to start thinking about, you know, what kind of legacy am I leaving? What am I leaving behind? You know, and then you're just going to have regrets again and think, you know, did I do enough? You know, and I'm like, I don't want to think about all that.
Yeah. I hope that I can skip some of that, but yeah, I think it's probably just a natural progression of life.
My friend Andy tells me that he's an old guy, one of the old guys. And he said, you need to learn to anticipate your regrets. And so I try to do that. I try to think, will I regret this? And a lot of times I will. So then I'll reevaluate. But so, dude, I've been watching you on social media doing your cold plunges. And I know this is going to air, like, it'll probably be a little bit warmer when this airs. But, like, the other day it was cold, man.
Yeah, it's very cold. I had to take a 5-gallon bucket and take a bunch of large chunks of ice that had built up, because for probably a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks, the temperature down here was, between 0 and 15 degrees. every morning. And I get in first thing when I wake up. My alarm goes off at 5. I get my bathrobe on, and I kind of talk under my breath about how bad I don't want to go and do it. The whole way downstairs, all the way out to my screened-in sun porch. And that whole time period, it was so cold that like an inch and a half, 2 inches of ice would form across the top and along the sides, because I have it's called a ice pod, and it's like a double layer thick Kevlar. So it's kind of like, it can be collapsible and everything. So ice would start to build up on the sides of the soft siding. So I have a wooden baseball bat, and I would like bust all the ice up, but it was just breaking up and falling into the water and not melting. It was just, and then the next day I'd smash more ice in. So it was just accumulating. Got to the point, Josh, there was more ice in there than there was water. And I tried to get in, and I was like trying to dig the ice out so that I could get to the bottom and get covered up. I'm like, this is ridiculous. So I had to take some of that out, put some new water in, and it's been considerably warmer the last couple of days. So water is it's sitting more in like the mid 30s, but yeah, man, it was freezing outside. The water actually felt warm compared to the air temperature when you were standing there before you got in.
What led you to say, okay, I'm going to do this?
Yeah. Obviously a lot of people are talking about it. And so when I hear a lot of people talking about things, I actually tend to look at it and like, okay, well, maybe this is a fad, but there's a lot of great research around sauna and cold plunge. And I've been saunaing for 5 or 6 years pretty consistently. The last 2 years, I'm religious. Unless there's like I'm traveling or they've shut it down for maintenance or cleaning, I'm at the sauna 5 to 7 days a week, 20 to 30 minutes a day. So I believe in it. I've seen the studies, and cold is just the opposite of that. So a lot of it was that, like, I want to reduce all-cause mortality, which sauna use and cold plunge reduces all-cause mortality. So that's great, right? Really healthy. I do jiu-jitsu, a lot of grappling, 3, 4, 5 days a week sometimes. I'm older, so that ice bath in the morning, just the general reduction of inflammation in my joints, that was an appealing aspect of it. The breathing, right? You have to learn to breathe. That's also with jiu-jitsu. Like, you're in a lot of tight spaces. So there was this in my mind. I'm like, okay, I'm also learning how to control my breathing in an environment where you're uncomfortable. And it's the hardest thing I'm going to do every day, at least in my mind. It still is every morning. And I think if you do the hardest thing that you're going to do every day, first thing in the day, you feel a lot better mentally about stuff. And so I've struggled with being somebody who, I get to the end of the day and I'm like, what did I even get done? What did I do today? I wandered. I wasn't focused. I didn't have anything. And after a while, I kind of had to be honest with myself that was something prohibiting me to get to the next level, whatever that level is. And ice doesn't, getting in a cold plunge doesn't completely solve that. But I can tell you, man, it's a bigger thing than I think a lot of people realize. A lot of people are like, oh, is it really that big of a difference? I'm like, go get in it. Do it for a week. You will be so motivated when you get out of that ice tub. And it's because you release a ton of dopamine. So, like, I don't know if anybody's ever done cocaine. I'm not a cocaine user, but, it's like cocaine. It lasts way longer. It's way healthier. And it's, again, like, I sit there, I stare at the water, and taking that first step, I can translate that into anything that I do all day long. So, kind of a lot of reasons, but yeah, it's not fun. It's definitely not the reason.
I did that a little bit with, I live over, again, you're from Bradford, so we have that connection here with the local landscape. I live near the duck pond. And so I'd walk over by the duck pond and I'd duck in the duck pond in my walks every day. So I did that for a little while, but it's all frozen over now. And it's also a little harder to get out of it now than it was before. So I'm like, I don't want to get stuck in the duck pond and then not be able to get out of it.
Yeah.
So I may build a cold plunge at some point, but although I mean, I can get a similar effect in the shower. So, but it's a little harder because you can turn it back up if you know what I mean?
Yeah, you can get a little bit of the effect in the shower. There's people who, they cold plunge every day and they get in at like 45 or 50 degrees. And there's a lot of data that would suggest that that's still beneficial for you. But I'm a little bit of a psychopath, and I want to push it. So to me, like, get it cold, 32 degrees, make it suck. 3 minutes. It's not that long, right? It's just like, get in there. I have this weird humming that I kind of go into. I don't even know where it came from, but now it's just like my brain goes there automatically. I sit down, take a couple of breaths, and then I kind of like hum with my breath. And then before I know it, it's like a minute left. I look at that clock, and some days it's like, please get here, just like get there. And then other days I sit there for 30 seconds extra, a minute extra, and I'm like, okay, I got you today. You're mine. Like, I kind of take a little bit of mental pleasure in, getting myself to a spot where I'm like, okay, I conquered that. So
it's like eating the frog, right? Have you ever heard that?
Yes.
Yeah. First thing in the morning, eat a frog, and then that's the worst thing you've done all day. So everything else should be easy after that.
Yeah, definitely.
Dude, so tell me, you do the sauna, you do jujitsu, do you do other working out as well?
I do. So, my routine is first thing in the morning, get in that ice bath. I get out of the ice bath, I put on my sweats, and I head right to the local YMCA. And it's like 5 minutes down the road from where I live. So I'm kind of lucky. I don't have too far to go to get there. And I get there right when they open. I go in, I do some body weight workouts for like 20 minutes to warm myself back up from the ice bath. And then kettlebells, burpees, Turkish get-ups, fireman carries. I used to do a lot of like press and pull. I used to do a lot of like powerlifting competitions, like bench pressing and things like that. But I started to get injured when I was grappling and doing the jiu-jitsu stuff. And I talked with who I thought was a very wise doctor. And he was like, if you've been really strong and doing a lot of traditional lifting, one of the things you're going to run into if you're not training in different ways and modalities is that you're going to do movements in grappling that your supporting muscles and ligaments aren't going to be able to handle the force that you're able to create with other muscles and ligaments because they have never felt that. You've just kind of been in a certain motion for 15, 20, 30 years of, doing this. Right. So, I've kind of scrapped any of what I used to do for years and have really started to embrace more of like a functional workout. Not always the heaviest weight. Sometimes it is pretty heavy weight, but I can tell you, I feel the strongest functionally that I ever have in my life. And you would be surprised at how much a Turkish getup with like a 15-pound kettlebell that you're holding up in the air. I mean, do 4 sets of 10 on each side with those and tell me you're not like completely winded and body burning, forearms on fire. It's a workout, and it's certainly something that's different, but I try to do that 3 days a week if I can. And then I'll do 2 days of like functional rest and stretching or cardio. And then the rest of my fitness really does come from jiu-jitsu. It's get a couple hours a night rolling around, good cardio, your heart rate's always up. And, it's just a lot of young, tough kids that like to beat up the old men.
Well, the old men probably probably can handle themselves, I think. So
once in a while I get over on them, but man, there's some killers. I'm so thankful. My son's 4.5 and he's gotten into it. So if he sticks with it, he'll have a leg up because, you know, I started way too late and it's fun, but I won't be able to do it forever. And I want to just enjoy it while I can, because it is definitely it takes a toll on your body.
Yeah, it seems like it would be a fun thing to do. Not quite ready for jiu-jitsu yet. I'll still I like boxing. That's kind of, you know, I can hit hard. I don't want to roll around on the floor yet. So, but it's all good. So, let's talk a little bit about the work that you're doing with Zippo, because I know you're doing some. You've worked with some artists, and with Zippo, again, you know, from where we're at, that's a local company to us for growing up, but it's a global brand making lighters and outdoor stuff, and you've been doing some work with them, right?
Yeah, I have. I gotta give my brother Joseph a lot of credit for this. He's the third oldest of us boys, and you know, he and I have done a lot of work together. We built a network that's pretty fun. You know, my brother lives in Los Angeles. We had a company back in the late 2018 timeframe before COVID started that was in the cannabis space in California. And we threw a lot of events and worked with a lot of cool companies. And a part of that was like a lot of celebrities, athletes started to get invested into that industry to try to, you know, financially, I think, you know, make good investments in the cannabis space that's growing. And we built a good network. And my brother started working with Zippo to make introductions to help Zippo enter into more alternative markets. You know, they've got a really nostalgic brand. They want to protect that brand. And, you know, I think they're doing the right thing by being cautious about how they approach cannabis and other alternative markets. But those markets really want to work with Zippo. And I think Zippo is coming back. It's becoming a lot more trendy. So, you know, it started with really bringing some brands to the table. And I got to give a shout out to my buddy, Greg Overton. So I've had Greg on my podcast a couple of times. If people don't know Greg, he's a painter that was made famous by Joe Rogan. Joe bought a bunch of his paintings, talked about it on the show. Greg went from being just, you know, a guy that was really working hard to try to get himself known to just doing crazy amounts of work, and just did a solo show at Sundance Film Festival actually last month. So really cool. And I went to him and said, "Hey man, do you want to work with Zippo?" And he did, but he did not want to be handling any of the distribution. And so we talked to Zippo about this and talked to them about some of the things that we've done in the past. And coming out of that meeting, Zippo was putting resources behind us to put together a business that could help brands like Greg both find Zippo, collaborate and work with them, but also handle all of the little things that a small business, an artist, doesn't have the resources to do that would typically prohibit them from working with Zippo. And it puts us in a spot to do a lot of the legwork for Zippo, where, you know, they're not wanting to deal with 50, 100-piece orders. And we'll do a lot of that legwork. So we're kind of building bridges and providing the services on that said bridge to ensure that everybody's happy and successful. And so far, so good. Like, we've got Greg. We work with High Rollers, which is a jiu-jitsu company. Wiz Khalifa's bodyguard, Lonnie, is actually a training partner at my academy. And he has High Rollers, which it's a very well-known jiu-jitsu competition for cannabis, and raw rolling papers. So a lot of cool stuff coming up that we're really excited about. And, you know, we want to bring stuff back to Bradford. I think, you know, maybe it's corny, but there's a part of me that'll always be in that town. I don't live in Bradford, but I'm close enough where being able to get back. And Zippo, you know, they employed a lot of folks in my family. My grandmother retired from Zippo, And it's cool. Like we went back and my brother and I had a meeting last week and we walk in and it's like, oh, wow. Like we know the woman at the front desk. We walk to the first meeting and you walk by 4 or 5 desks, you know, everybody that's there. And that's really special. And I think a lot of people probably do recognize that and appreciate it for what it is. But when you've lived other places and you see how disconnected and how lack of community there is, you start to understand how important and special that is. And so, you know, I think people take for granted that Zippo's there. There's a lot to criticize, you know, and rightfully so sometimes. But they've really been the lifeblood of that town. And I think they could be gone someday and people would really not know what to do. And I hope and pray that that never happens, because I'd be petrified to see what would happen to Bradford in that vacuum. But for now, I'm really excited to work with them. And yeah, we've got a website you can go to. It's called litdistro.co. And you can get really cool custom design lighters there. If you're a brand that you want to work with Zippo, we've got platinum pricing because we kind of aggregate. So it's a great way to help those brands get the pricing so that they can be profitable. And yeah, we've got a couple of cool projects in the works that if everything works out, will be really cool. So if you're a Joe Rogan listener, keep your eyes open and ears peeled for some discussions that might be happening, which is really exciting for us. So
that's awesome. Yeah. I am a Joe Rogan listener. It's a long podcast. I always try to keep my episodes about an hour ish, you know, and I'm like 4 hours, 3 hours. It's a long investment, but I do enjoy listening to them. And yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. That'd be really cool to see maybe some partnership or something there. So
yeah,
very neat. Yeah, and I saw the artwork on, you know, Greg Overton's artwork on the lighters, and gosh, they look great. They look fantastic. So
yeah, now I have mine right now. So I carry this. This is it's a samurai one that he did, which is really cool. But yeah, they and then like Zippo has new inserts like torches, and like I kind of forgot how cool Zippos were, and then it's like, man, you know, I started looking. I have like a safe with a bunch of cool ones in there. It's like, I think American made craftsman products that last, like that to me is where things are going back to. We did our test and, you know, with like you said, right? Like they used to put things in glass. Now it's in plastic. We tried this. And I think a lot of people are like, you know what? I'm not really digging the convenience versus what I'm giving up for a lot of things.
This is the Manlihood ManCast.
Are you in need of marketing help for your business or nonprofit? Do you have a company or organization that is thinking about hiring an in-house staff person to do your marketing, but realizing it's out of the budget to bring on someone with the right skills and experience?
If you need an expert to help you with any of the following:
social media, graphic design, website design, web hosting, public relations, video production, podcast editing, short form video editing, email marketing, search engine optimization, content marketing, grant writing.
Grand River Agency is here to help you amplify your message and get it in front of the right people.
Visit us on the web at grandriver.agency.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's like growing up in a town, you know, in this area and seeing Zippos my whole life, like it's a completely different thing than a Bic, you know what I mean? And you know, and it lasts and it does more, and it's you know, if it breaks, they'll fix it, you know. And yeah, that American craftsmanship is something that I think we need to get back to. Like, even if you don't smoke, right? Like, it's still a handy thing to have. How many times you need to light something on fire? Yeah. And yeah, so very handy thing to have. But I mean, we also, you know, I know that Zippo and Case Knives are also closely connected, which is again another American craftsman brand, and you know, they're doing fantastic stuff. And both companies are also keeping up with the times as well. So they're not just the old fashioned things, like they do new things, which I think is really kind of neat too.
Yeah, no, I would agree. That's the biggest surprise. I had I've been gone for a while. So Zippos to me just kind of, it goes back to the lighter, right? The windproof lighter. It's like they have hand warmers. They've got all kinds of great accessories. And so, yeah, it's cool to work with them and see if we can maybe bring something interesting to the mix. So far, so good.
Yeah, I love it. Very cool. Yeah, and to work back with your old town too, right? You grew up here, and to come back and to connect with the people. Yeah, man, that's awesome. It's a pretty, they say you can't go home again, but you can. You don't have to. It may not be the same it was when you were little. It might be very different, but it's still home.
It is, right? The people are what I always miss the most. There's a lot of great folks that are still in Bradford. So as long as there are, and as long as I have family, it gives me an extra reason to come back. And like that, right? Like we came back from a meeting. I got to go and spend time with my grandmother. My brother was in from California, got to spend time with him. So there's like I try to do that, right? And probably subconsciously, how can I build things that allow me to enjoy the people and the things that I like? And then hopefully there's some added financial benefit that comes out of it, and satisfaction and fulfillment in other ways. But again, it kind of comes back to the purpose, right? You start doing the things that you actually really enjoy to do. And it's a corny saying, but it's like, if you find something that you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And I don't think that once you realize that, you're really ever willing to go back to things that are not in that vein.
Yeah. I mean, work is still always work, right? Like you still have to put the time in, just like, jujitsu is hard. Getting in the water in the morning is hard, in the ice water, like it's not easy, but when it's a matter of purpose, there's a value in it. You can't replace.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? Because work is work, but it's maybe in my own mind, I can separate the work that's needed versus the work that I don't want to do because that it actually is pointless. Like we do have a good internal. Most people have a good internal. We can maybe lie to ourselves, but we know we're lying to ourselves, and we know we're lying to other people. And so I think when we know that we're doing things that are just like, this isn't what I want to do, and this is kind of a waste of time. And that's commendable because it's not always easy. You have to make a living. People have bills, right? So like, kudos to anybody that gets up and puts a game face on and does something that they don't want to do because they're providing for their family. Like that's awesome, right? But I think people need to bet on themselves.
Yeah, like that entrepreneurial spirit is something that I feel like I have. I know you have, and not everybody has that. Some people need that safety and security and direction that you get from working for somebody else, But even then, like, find purpose and joy in it, Like sometimes I think it's not the lie to yourself aspect of it, but it's like, you know what? I enjoy working at this convenience store and checking people out all day and getting to have conversations with them. And so the job might not pay as much as I want, but I actually enjoy the work. So focus on that, and then be the best darn convenience store clerk you can, and you will have the fulfillment that you want out of it. But if it's something that you hate and you can't find joy in it, then that's probably not where you need to be, and you need to work it while you're finding something else.
Well, you can come across a few of those people. Just go to some of your local establishments, and you'll find those individuals that they don't have any desire to want to be there and interface with you.
Everywhere. Yeah. There are some people who, I think looking back, there are some people that shouldn't have been teachers. There's some people that shouldn't have been, people that should never have been let out of their cage in the morning.
Officers.
Yeah, there's that. That's definitely,
you get it in every walk of life, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it's on any given. I had a conversation with a guy today that worked at at a place I used to work. So, kind of catching up with a former coworker, and he had the same complaints that he's always had, that he had for the, years that I worked there. And I'm thinking, now I know why I wasn't happy there, because the people were always complaining about it. And I don't think that I had as much complaint about it as they did.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. There's just something about about not complaining, but doing something about it, you know?
Yeah. I struggle sometimes because I feel like it's really easy, and it must not be, because there's a lot of people that struggle with that. So I try to be very understanding that it's not the same for everybody. But some people have all the skill and ability in the world. And it's like, how do you not realize that you are deliberately getting in your own way? And I think I said this earlier, but it comes back to me again to that word insecurity. If you're insecure, then you're never going to feel comfortable that you're doing the right thing. You're going to be in your own head. You're going to feel like you can't carry it forward. You're going to give up. But I think if you aren't afraid to fail, and you realize that failure is the best way to learn and get better, and that it doesn't define who you are. And that's the thing, right? Like, how do you get to that point if you do feel like failure defines who you are? But if I don't know the answer to that, but I would tell you that if you look yourself in the mirror and you ask yourself that question, like, does failure define who I am, or am I comfortable failing? And do I know how to take failure and really get the most of it, most from it? If you can't say that you truly do, and that failure defines who you are, I'd figure that out. That'll change your life.
You, let's get real personal now, because you said, you talked about overcoming the insecurity. What kind of insecurity did you struggle with?
I definitely didn't. I had a lot of confidence, but it was fake confidence, I think, as I've gotten older. Yeah. And, I don't know. I had a lot of, there's domestic violence in the house as a kid. So there was a lot of anxiety, and domestic more in less physical domestic violence, but a lot of like yelling and fighting, right? So like going to bed as a little kid, and your parents are fighting when you go to bed, and you're laying in bed just like, are they going to fight all night? Like, are they going to be okay tomorrow? So I don't know if that made me, because I was active, right? And I think that this is a thought, right? And who knows, maybe I'm way off on this, but I believe that I was insecure because of that stuff going on in my life while I was doing a lot of things that were competitive, that were team oriented. And so I was very insecure doing that in that moment. And I think that carried over with anything that was competitive. Like, as I started to get into the job field, as I, had a career, I looked at every one of those things as though like I wasn't good enough, or that I was going to lose it. I also think, coming from Bradford, right, being insecure, that I'm in a world that I've never would have dreamt and didn't know anybody that was in. Like, I've been very fortunate to advance my career and have a little bit of financial success that creates insecurity. People call it imposter syndrome, or, you call it whatever you want. But I was telling my brother-in-law, he's here visiting, I worked for somebody for a decade and I left. And when I left, I was petrified, because this person had paid me very well. I had a great title. I was doing things that, compared to where I grew up, it was like, wow, you made it. Like, you're doing well. And I'm sure there was a little bit of this person took advantage of that, saw that in me. But when I finally decided to leave for other reasons, I realized really quickly that I was actually undervalued, and that I didn't recognize that I was undervalued because of where I came from. I thought I was overvalued. And I actually thought I was like man, if I leave this place, nobody else is going to value me at this level. Little did I know, I was valued well above what I thought was already amazing, right? So we create these mental boundaries in our head. And to me, that was an insecurity that I had to get over, that I was good enough, right? And how do you know that? It comes with reps and just being around other idiots and being like, wait, this person's been here for 30 years and this is what they do and this is their role. And I know more. Like, trust what you see and believe in yourself, right? Because there's no hard rules and facts that say that a certain amount of time that people have been at a job or a career. I'm definitely had been insecure about that. And I think the biggest thing is that I'm insecure probably about effing up as a parent, right? Like, I have that fear. So maybe it's not insecurity, because I'm pretty confident in how I approach being a parent, but I'm very confident and deliberate because I want to ensure that all of the things that I felt were negative, and not just that they were negative, but because I think negative is, you need friction in your life, right? You don't want to engineer friction out of a child's life. But I do believe that the things that I didn't recognize or have the foresight, whether because my parents didn't show me, education didn't show me, or whatever it was, what are the things that I can help seed and help them understand better so that they can take advantage of things? Like, I don't want to go beyond that, because, I think you don't want to just, you gotta let the tree grow. Right. But, that becomes scary, right? You get a little insecure. So
yeah,
I think everybody is, though. Right. And I think you can't be afraid to be insecure. You gotta own it.
I can speak to the one about being a parent too. We've gone through some stuff with one of our kids recently, and it's hard. He's an adult. I mean, all my kids are adults now. Some of them are doing great and some of them are okay. And some of them are doing, really great. And then one's really struggling a little bit, and, you start asking yourself those questions, like, what could I have done better? And did I do anything wrong? And the answer to both of those questions is you did the best you could. And did you screw up? Yeah. You know what I mean? My kids, even the one that they're having some struggles, he's still a great kid. He's still a great guy, and I love him and I'm proud of him. You know what I mean? But, and I did the best I could. And then as an adult, he makes his choices, and that's really kind of like your job is to prepare them for the world, make sure they can survive on their own, make sure they know how to make choices. You impart your values to them, and then they make the choice. They'll make the choice to be who they're going to be, and they're probably going to fall down and fail. And then you're going to be there for them when they, need help back up, and the degree to which you help them back up will determine how well they can get up on their own each time. Right. Mm-hmm. And, so if there's insecurity about it, that's probably a good thing, because you should be humble about it. Like, I can screw this up, but the good news is no matter how much you screw it up, even if you were first of all, the fact that you care about it means you're a good parent, because most parents don't care about it. I mean, maybe not most, but a lot of parents don't care. They really don't. They don't give a crap about their kids, and you care about them. So I think that they've already got, the gold mine and a dad right there. No, you care about how they're going to turn out.
I appreciate that. I try, right? I had a conversation with a child group friend, dad. We pulled our son from the daycare that he was at, and instead of preparing to put him into kindergarten, we were going a non-traditional schooling route. And it's not private school. It's private. But it's Montessori style. There's no teachers. There's no grades. It's very group learning oriented. Just a different set of values, and there's reasons for it, right? I'm not completely against, there's a lot of great people in public education. I've said this a lot on my podcast, but we wanted to go a different direction. And I had a dad tell me, oh, well, the Seneca Valley School District is good enough for my kid. And I'm just like, I literally, I just put on a smile, and I am almost ashamed of myself that I didn't challenge him. But I felt like, being at the trampoline park and doing that's probably not the greatest thing with a bunch of family members and kids there. But when I got in the car, I told my wife, I'm like, I don't know, maybe I'm making a big deal out of this, but good enough for my kid. Like, I don't know that I could ever say that. And that worries me that, I am going to miss something. And I think I probably am harder on myself than I should be. But I think if there's anything I should be hard on myself, it's about how I'm going to raise what's going to be the, hopefully future leaders of this world, right? Like a young hero. And just to your point, man, there are people who really don't give a shit. And go no further than just a disgusting Facebook video you can find. I saw some lady that had a little boy in his underwear in a cart at a supermarket in New Jersey, and it was like freezing cold outside. It's just like, what is the world coming to, right? And Bradford is not exempt to that, right? I mean, there's a lot of issues. So, yeah, man, I don't know.
Yeah, you bring up the private education or the different education, dude. So we went through that. We chose to homeschool our kids. They went to a virtual charter school, and man, people like, well, aren't you worried that they'll be properly socialized? And I'm like, yeah, I guess they could go and hang out with all the monkeys at the public school. But yeah. You make the choice that's best for your kids. I just interviewed Matt Boudreau, which that episode it's probably already, by the time this airs, it will have aired. If you're unfamiliar with him, you need to check him out.
I've had Matt on my podcast. Matt's who made the introduction to so we're in that whole organization with Apogee. So he and Tim Kennedy are awesome guys, right? And his whole approach to education. I had him on the podcast, and I'm excited now to listen to him on yours because Matt's a great, great guy. And the way he lays out his understanding of education, his experience of both public and private education. And, every question that I had for him, he answered very thoughtfully. And we got off the podcast and I was like, man, I might need to move to Texas or North Carolina. And he's like, why? I'm like, because I want to put my kids in this. And he's like, I'll get you into the guys in Pittsburgh. I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah, man. He's like, I'll connect you. And it was a year-long process. And partially because my son was younger, but he's 4.5, and we were able to get him started now. And man, greatest decision that we've made. The difference right out of the gate is very noticeable. And honestly, one of the coolest surprises that I'm excited about is the accountability level that's different for the parents. Mm-hmm. And the tribe of people, right? Like, I can't stress enough, and it's, maybe this is a great just kind of full circle moment, because what you've tried to do with and are doing with Manlihood, right? Like, my podcast is a lot less about like a coalition of a very, more narrow focus. I'm talking with neuroscientists, I'm talking with ex-murderers, which has its own purpose, but you've created a community. And that community that we're involved with to this point it's important, and hopefully people are able to replicate that in public school, because I think it is that important. But people having the same ideals, and not like granular surface level ideals about like, this guy is the right person for this political but it's more around like principles, morals, more foundational elements of what makes people, because they're secure, and they have to be to put their kid into a program like that. It's kind of why I love jiu-jitsu, right? Like, I roll with cops, criminals, lawyers, doctors, mechanics, people that voted for Biden, probably people that voted for Trump, people that can't vote, people that don't want to vote. But everybody shows up on Saturday morning and beats the shit out of each other for an hour and a half, and, helps each other get better. And they all have that mutual respect. And there's a community that I have there, right? And so, like, to your point about aren't you afraid that your kid isn't going to be socialized because he's not in school? No, I think he'll be more socialized in a better way, because he's going to learn how to think. He's going to be interacting with kids that are of multiple ages. Mm-hmm. He's going to have to figure out the hierarchy of how to interact with kids from the ages of 5 to 8, and instead of being in a grade, he's going to learn to fail. He's going to do projects that are functional as opposed to sitting in a desk, right? Like learning stuff that has zero application in the real world. So I'm excited about that. And yeah, man, I'm excited to listen to Matt. I'm sure that was a killer conversation.
It was, and I'm excited about it too. And I'm kind of glad. I didn't even realize that Matt had been on your show. I must have missed that episode. So I'm excited to hear about that. And I'm going to go check it out on your show as well. But
yeah, he told me something really interesting, Josh, and this is what made me actually want to pursue sending my kids here, because he said in any day, the perfect scenario is that the teacher or guides, what they call them, guides, could not show up, and the kids would start the day on their own with a Socratic discussion. They would identify what the tasks are for the day. My son talks about his code of conduct. They have a code of conduct, and the guides don't hold each other or the kids accountable. The kids hold each other accountable, and that builds character. You got a 6-year-old that's telling an 8-year-old, hey, you're not living up to the standards that we've set for this classroom. Like, wow. To me, that's what our kids need more than, what type of gender they want to be this week. And I'm probably tongue in cheek. I don't think every 7 and 8-year-old kid is learning about gender, but you get my drift.
Well, I do think that there is a breakdown in the public school system. And I'm not saying that to be critical. I think there's some great teachers in the public school system. I think there's still some remnants of what should be there. But I think that that whole system was designed, it was designed to create soldiers and factory workers. And it was designed to create very specific molds that people who think like Josh does and people who think like my kids did, and, they didn't fit into it. And, and I think that, like I said, looking back on my experience in school, I had some really good experiences because I had some really good teachers, but those teachers are all dead or retired now, and I'm not, my daughter just graduated high school and then graduated her tech school to be a nail tech. And, but when she was going to school there, she had a couple of really great teachers who really invested and really helped her and gave her, perspective. And then she had a lot of them who just were going with the flow and trying to inject their political opinions on everybody, and I guess that's the real world. But the system itself, man, like, does it need, I can't sit in a chair for 8 hours a day. I got to get up and move around and do something, Yeah. It's just,
no, you
expect a 5-year-old to nail it.
There's some teachers that I know I benefited from greatly that I wouldn't want to listen to today if I was a student, because those teachers are sharing every thought that they have on social media and in their classroom, and you're creating sides. When I had certain teachers that, I don't know if you didn't go to Bradford High, right?
No.
So, but Mr. Stillman, I always talk about Mr. Stillman, and I would actually probably argue, I have no idea, I could be wrong, but I think he and I would probably disagree on a lot of things in the world today, but it would be spirited conversation backed by very detailed discussion. And we'd probably agree to disagree on some things and agree on other things. But that guy always made us think. And I never knew what his real opinions were, because he did a really good job of just trying to teach you history in a way that you absorbed it and understood the consequences of history. And then it's not just facts, but that history was the result of action. Right. And if you can start to draw that correlation, you start to get really nervous about what you start to see right now. You're like, oh my God, where are we going? Right. I hate to be pessimistic, but I'm very nervous about 2024, which is driving me to be very focused. And when I say nervous, I feel good. Like, I know I'm good. If anything happens, I'm in a good spot, and for all different reasons. But I don't necessarily know that I like the trajectory the society's going in, and the world that we know. I don't know it's ever going to go back anywhere close. I think we've kind of long lost the ability to control the trajectory of civilization. I think it's kind of into a autopilot mode, as I would say.
Well, I was on another podcast earlier today, and he was asking me about, we think, he talked about like the hard times create strong men who create good times, who create, that whole cycle. And he was asking me about that. And I said, I think that cycle is more like fractals. It's not just one cycle. It's like multiple little cycles inside of little cycles. And I mean, like when I look out at the world and I see all of the crazy, I also see so much good. Like our society could collapse, but here's the good news. There's a lot of people who are like recognizing how messed up everything is, and they're raising a next generation of kids who are going to fix it. If their kids don't fix it, the grandkids are going to fix it. And, I think it'll get better. I think it's got to crash on the way down.
That's what I think. I believe that in order for that generation to fix it, it means that a lot of powerful, very wealthy, power hungry people are going to have to not be in power. And I feel there's not an easy way for that to happen. And I don't think there's a gradual way for that to happen. I think it has to happen in a way that's pivotal and monumental for not just American civilization, but probably an impact on human civilization. We've kind of let the genie out of the bottle. You know what I mean? It's like, how do you go back on a lot of things? It's not just about having nice people anymore.
Yeah,
because there's enough bad people and enough technology that even good people, unfortunately, in the human realm, we're kind of outnumbered, and it's going to take a bigger something different is going to have to happen. We can't just keep thinking we're going to outpace bad. I mean, I think AI could be alive already, and there's actual evidence that could be the case, man. And if you're following everything with OpenAI and kind of how they ousted their CEO and then brought him back in, and thoughts that maybe he didn't share, that it had gotten sentient, and there's that type of stuff. Like, what do you do? Good people or not?
I use AI like every day for my job, and it's still pretty stupid.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I know I'm using
depends on what applications and things you're leveraging,
but,
right?
No, but I think your point though is, so you said that there is more bad than good. And I think that, I actually think that there's probably more good than bad. I think that's just that most of us have been quiet because we've been told to be quiet. And I think that day will come when people are waking up. The people that were neutral, that didn't know any better, that were going along with what they were being told, are starting to see the truth, starting to see the corruption. They're starting to see, you can't it's, I think we're
I
in
guess
for a
that's my
monumental
point,
shift.
right? I think it's going to come to a place where the people who are in charge look at what already happened, right? They closed businesses. They told us we weren't allowed to leave our houses. They made old people stay in old folks' homes, and people were waving and hugging through glass. I mean, dude, like the amount of mental effery that was going on is astounding as you start to really think back to the shit that was peddled right out of the gate that they absolutely knew was false. And so you're not wrong. We do have a lot of very smart people. I heard Eric Weinstein talk about this. Like, this created this bad side effect that they didn't realize, which was a lot of really smart, intelligent people got out of mainstream, and now they're on the opposite side of this fighting it. I actually think they're going to win, because I think logic and reason will always outweigh just the craziness that's going on. But the people that are holding the craziness together are so rich, are so powerful, and have such a grip on all of this, that in order for that change to happen, which I think it will happen, bad things are going to happen. And I don't think it's just going to be like, oh, you know what? Donald Trump won the election in November and we're back to make America being great again. I think the genie's out of the bottle. And I think that there's going to have to be fundamental change. And that's what's going to be disruptive for a lot of people. Now, I think I'm good during fundamental change, but I think that whether that's inflation, whether that like at a level and things that's going to be painful for folks. And I think people need to be at least one eye open that possibility is real, because there are people that are sick of it. And in the past, nothing bad happens because people kind of get to a point and then the pressure wanes, and the people that were almost going to speak up, they just go back and they don't speak up again. Right. But it's spilling. The water's spilling out of the cup.
Well, I think that'll, like I said, yeah, I do agree it'll take something monumental, but I think when it happens, it's not going to be a hard fought battle. I think it'll be, that's just my opinion. I think that when everybody's awake and when we've had enough, I mean, so, okay, let's just look at let's say we had a civil war in this country, right? And the battle lines are pretty clear ideologically, right? I'm just talking about our country, because this is happening all over the world. And actually, I think they want a civil war in this country, by the way, because that actually allows the globalist agenda. See, now I'm getting into, you got me into conspiracy theory stuff again. Well, but anyway, but let's say we did.
To end you with, but yeah,
that's all right. But if we wanted to, if we had a civil war in this country, our division is pretty clearly red and blue, and it's blue cities and it's red everything else. Where does the food come from? It comes from the red. So a couple of blockades and highways shut down, and a week later we get what we want. It's not going to be that difficult of a transition to make it happen. To turn things over. It's just the question of, are we ready for that? Everybody talks about right now, the insurrection. Everybody's saying, oh, Donald Trump incited, and well, they say he incited an erection, but I think they mean an insurrection. And I'm like, if we wanted an insurrection, we'd have had one. Like, we have more weapons in this. You don't go into the Capitol with no weapons and call that an insurrection. If we wanted it, we'd have it already. Like, we would have completely turned it over. That's not what that was, So
yeah, man, they're gonna push that as much as they can. It's one of the only plays that I feel like some of the extreme folks that are anti-Trump really have.
And I don't care. I don't care whether I'm not even a particularly big Donald Trump fan, so I'm not even saying that. I'm just talking about one side of that equation is very clearly on the side of the real enemy, I think.
Yeah,
and the other side is only less clearly on that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So there's still like a lot of bad stuff with how that side of politics goes down. But at least at the core fundamental levels, I believe that there's a level of like alignment and truth. It's, it's like, hey, at least like, guys, we can't get that evil.
Right.
Right. I actually heard this, and this is what freaks me out, because I'm a little skeptical about religion. We've talked about this on my podcast, and skeptical more in the sense of like we kind of don't really know. So what I'm about to say kind of makes me think either I've lost my mind or it is actually maybe this black and white in front of us. But have you ever heard about the whole Paramount Picture conspiracy?
No, tell me about this one.
Okay, so the logo for Paramount Pictures, it's the mountain and the stars, and the stars are aligned. So there's 22 stars that are arched over top of a mountain. And there were 22 fallen angels with Lucifer that were named, and they fell to a coordinates of, I believe it was like 33.33. which is, if you look on a map using I'm trying to think, it's a European, like the latitude, longitude, but like you go to this point on a map and it's the mountain that is, it's like the actual mountain that's portrayed in the Paramount logo. And so it's like, why did Paramount literally in their logo put this mountain that's associated with where the 22 fallen angels fell, like based on biblical terms. You're more of a scholar than I am and can piece some of this together. So I would, if you can, go look and see if this is all bullshit that I've learned or if this is any truth to that.
I can tell you now. So in terms of the canon of Scripture, the 66 books, which I would consider as canon of Scripture,
yes,
it says that a third of the angels fell. It didn't say how many there were before that or how many there were after that, but so the number 22 is not necessarily consistent with the canon of Scripture. However, there are people who have a belief system that is a Luciferian belief system who would say that 22 angels fell from heaven along with Lucifer.
That number does come from somewhere then.
Yes, but not from the canon of biblical Scripture.
Gotcha.
So somebody else has said that but yes, why would Paramount do that? Right. Yeah. Because they're worshiping their God, their God, which is Lucifer. And yeah, like, dude, you want to get into that whole crazy stuff? We could talk all night.
The symbolism that,
yeah,
I'm like, there's no way that this was, once you know what it's like, you almost know you sound crazy when you say it.
Dude, the symbolism is everywhere. The symbolism that is used by people who worship, Lucifer, right? The Satan that worship him. And I think most people that call themselves Satanists don't actually believe in Satan. They're just rebelling against Christianity. I saw a great meme the other day that was like, "Dear Satanists." It was coming from a Christian Stoic page. It's like, "Dear Satanists, I feel really bad for you because your religion has been hijacked by state and become an issue of conformity now. If you really want to get back to nonconformity and being a rebel, may I suggest Christianity?" No, but in terms of all that symbolism, dude, like, so there are people that have beliefs that are based off of, it's like Christian fan fiction, right? And so they think they're worshiping Lucifer, or they are worshiping Lucifer, but they're hearing that side of the story, not the story that actually happened, which, I mean, for me, I believe that the canon of Scripture actually happened. So, but their symbolism is everywhere. I mean, all you have to do is watch the awards shows and you see it, I mean, like, they're literally giving people a little golden idol, for winning. They're dressing up with horns and singing songs about sex, and gyrating in front of little children, I mean, come on, man, it's everywhere. And dude, having been a conspiracy theory enthusiast, and when you research, just look at broadcasting, like NBC, ABC, and CBS, right? The people that started those were in military intelligence, all of them. Like, they didn't start those so that they could have, entertainment. They started those so that they could have control over what people think, Yeah. And it's been that way forever. So, I'm convinced that there are people, some of them may be real Satanists, like you said, and who are implanting their symbolism everywhere, and there are people who just want to control everything. So, I can't, like, I'm not going to go so far with the whole, QAnon Pizzagate conspiracy theory thing to say that, Hillary Clinton is a Satanist who's worshiping Satan and killing babies in the basement of the Comet Ping Pong, right? Like, that's a little ridiculous.
Well, I think, some of the conspiracy theories, I mean, you even look at her husband, right? I think all the times that Bill Clinton was with Jeffrey Epstein, it's, okay, maybe he likes little kids and he likes little girls. Okay, maybe. Or he was the most powerful guy in the world. He was the president of the United States. Maybe he used Jeffrey Epstein as a political weapon, and he was actually getting other people to do things with Jeffrey Epstein so that he could have leverage over them because he was the most powerful man in the world. I think sometimes we'd like to assume that it was like really as simple as Bill Clinton was just getting young girls and like going into some room that they like had some guy stand by the door. And I think it's probably more like hey, Jeff, I need you to go meet with this guy and get some incriminating evidence on him or get him in a compromising position so that I can get some law or, act passed so that I can make a bunch of money in some dirty scheme.
Or we always do this. I always give you the or, right?
Yeah.
Or it was some other powerful person from some other country who was using Jeffrey Epstein to get the dirt and the blackmail on Bill Clinton and other people.
Absolutely.
Because when you trace, I actually think Jeffrey Epstein was the second in command. I think Ghislaine Maxwell was the first in command. And her father worked for Mossad, and by the way, owned all of
next to his yacht in the Mediterranean. So
and owned McGraw-Hill, the textbook company that taught us everything we know about history and what we were supposed to know.
Who had partnerships with Disney.
Yeah. So yeah, that rabbit hole and all of the spinoffs and all of the connections is ridiculous. And here's the other thing. So, did you ever see the video of the guy? I think the name that was it was released under was Rusty Shackelford, but there's a guy who like released a video of a drone over Little St. James Island. He got drone footage and he rode all over the island with a drone and looked at everything that he could, actually into the windows of some of the buildings and everything else. Dude, you want to talk about symbolism? Look up that video. Look up like the drone tour of Little St. James, and you'll be like, oh, so Jeffrey Epstein's island was Satanist. There's some weird stuff.
Interesting.
So, I don't know. I don't know whether they worship Satan or not, but I know there's some weird stuff.
Definitely. Yeah, there definitely is.
Justin's like, I should have never got Josh on this topic.
No, I feel bad. I'm just noticing now. I'm in such a different spot. My lighting, half of my face, I look like I'm like hiding in half CIA. And then I realized I was trying to adjust my mic. Once we were recording, you can't switch the mic that you're on. So hopefully I sound fairly decent.
Yeah, it sounds good. It does sound good. And then, and the cool thing about Riverside is it has some good filters too, so it'll sound good in the end too. So you won't even know that.
I need to actually look into that.
It's great.
Like a really good platform.
It's great. It's I pay the same I did for Zoom, and it doesn't let me down like Zoom did. So
very cool.
But hey, before we wrap up our conversation, I know we've run a little longer than an hour. Are you okay with that? You still got a couple more minutes left?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. I'm going to ask you the questions I like to ask all of my guests. And you've answered them before, but maybe your answers are a little different this time. So we'll see.
Very cool. Yeah, let's see what I come back with.
All right. First question. Justin, what does it take to be a man?
I think it takes somebody to be willing to be accountable. And I think if that's the first thing, right? There's a lot of things I think that it takes to be a man, but you can't be it's tough to be a man if you're not accountable.
Good answer. Excellent.
I can elaborate. I mean, I can expand on that too, but I think, if you're accountable, the rest, like, you don't have to focus on providing, because if you're accountable and you're the man, then you're going to provide, you're going to protect, you're going to lead, you're going to challenge, you're going to discipline, right? If you're not accountable, you won't do those things all the time, at least. So,
who are you accountable to?
I try to make it so that I'm accountable to myself. I don't want to have to be accountable to other people. I don't think it's fair to them. Now, I know I am accountable to my family, and in certain very specific instances, I'm accountable for certain things. That's like, hey, this is my responsibility. This is your responsibility. But I think it starts with me, and nobody is going to hold me more accountable than I'm going to hold myself. And when I don't hold myself accountable, how am I going to let other people hold me accountable? Like, are you kidding me? You're just going to push back on other people if you don't hold yourself accountable. So I think it starts with you.
That's actually something I needed to hear today, so thank you.
Certainly.
All right, Justin, you get your hands on a flux capacitor and you plug it into your Toyota Tacoma and you get it up to 88 miles an hour. And you are able to go back in time about 20 years and visit the 10-year-old version of Justin. What do you want to tell him?
That's a great question, Josh. Are there any rules of what I can tell myself?
Nope, you can tell him whatever you want.
I would just tell him everything's going to be okay. Yeah, no, I think that would probably, because I'd want to encompass a lot of things, right? And I think my biggest fear, the biggest insecurity as a kid was not knowing how things were going to be, right? So I think I don't know the other answer I would give you would be, I don't know that I would take the chance. I don't know that I would want to mess it up and that's probably the true answer as I really sit here and think about it. I don't know that I would tell myself anything because I'm where I'm at right now and I'm really happy with where I'm at right now. So I'm here for a reason, and all of the things that I would be afraid that I'd kind of butterfly effect screw up. I don't want the guy disappearing in the Polaroid. So that's probably the realistic thing. But if I didn't have an impact in a negative way and everything else kind of fell through, it just was like, I'd just tell myself it's going to be okay. Right. And be able to go after the things and do the things in the moment without the anxiety and fear of what tomorrow holds.
Yeah, I think 10-year-old Justin would be pretty proud of the Justin that ended up coming out. I think he'd be like, if he saw you, he'd know everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Be like, hey, I made it.
I'd also probably be like, don't go egging on this. Like there'd be a couple other things I'd be like, hey, totally avoid doing this. Or, there'd even probably like, don't buy that girl the drink at the bar. It's going to lead to, yeah. So, there's some of that, but you can't live. I don't live with any regret really. There's things that I think, man, I can learn from that. But thankfully I haven't done anything that I can say at the end of the day, like, wow, that really, I'm disappointed in myself to the level that I regret it. So I'm disappointed all the time, but again, I hold myself to probably a higher standard than I even should. But we all should. That's probably a part of being a man.
I like it. All right, Justin, what is your best advice for the men that are listening today?
My best advice is that there's no rule. There's no rules to this life, right? Like if you're living a way because you believe that you have to live that way, whether it's because of societal pressure, family, like what, get that out of your head. Life is this big, gigantic, free-flowing tube. It's not a highway with exits and stuff that you have to like get off at this exit. Like it doesn't work that way. And I think a lot of men get themselves caught up with the expectations that they know they hold, the accountability aspect. I know I struggled with that, right? Like you have responsibilities. And so there's fear of going after things. And sometimes the answer isn't easy. Sometimes it means you're going to have to put in double duty. Like you don't get to just like quit your day job so that you can focus on what you love if you have bills and you need your day job. What it means is that you need to, if you care enough about getting out of your day job because you want to pursue your dream, that you're going to put in some late nights, that you're going to sacrifice, that you're going to communicate even better with your significant other so that you can find the time to get done what you need to get done so that you can build the momentum and the trajectory and play the long game. But if you're not willing to do that, it's going to be tough. And I think the last thing is, and it's tied into all this, is bet on yourself. You have to bet on yourself. And whether that is like bet on yourself to go do your own thing, or bet on yourself to ask for more responsibility, or ask for a raise, or, just value yourself more, and just even how you look at it, look at yourself. But if you're not going to bet on yourself, how are you going to bet on me? If I'm not going to be my biggest advocate, how are you going to be my biggest advocate? Like I'm supposed to sell you on me if I can't even sell myself on me, right? So like, if you're looking for other people to put you on or to get you to where you want to be, how? You haven't even convinced yourself you deserve it, right? So like, start there. Start with yourself. Focus on yourself. Bet on you. And what does that mean? And it doesn't mean you throw every chip you have on red and pray, but build a strategy. But know that strategy should be bet on you. What do you know? Follow your gut, right? Like all these sayings are there for a reason. So, any guy that's listening to this, if you've got a dream, clock's ticking, man. Get after it.
Again, man, I think you're preaching to the guy that needs to hear it today. So thank you for that encouragement, man. It's good stuff.
Definitely.
Justin, if our guys want to connect, you've got a podcast. Tell me about your podcast. How can they connect with that?
Yeah. The Curious Jones, Spotify, Apple, go give it a listen. I talk with, I think the last few episodes, I have had the likes of Wiz Khalifa's bodyguard, Lon, who we talked about his whole journey. I mean, that guy told me some crazy stuff. He got chased by the Ku Klux Klan when he was a teenager down in Alabama with his family in a car, like crazy stuff. And we talked about that all the way to like touring with Wiz Khalifa and Snoop, like cool stories. But I've had convicted murderers. I've had doctors, scientists. I've had anybody that I find interesting. So they're usually 30 to 45 an hour and a half, depending on who I'm talking to, long form conversations. But definitely go check it out, subscribe, share with your friends, the ones that you like, and follow on social media. Real Curious Jones on Instagram mostly is where I spend a lot of my time posting kind of anything that motivates me, try to share the ice bath journey, some of the fitness stuff, anything that gets me excited. But some really cool guests getting lined up that actually I have a couple of unanswered messages on Instagram that I keep seeing flashing on my phone. And I'm like, I'm really hopeful that's responses from a couple of people I've been trying to finalize some stuff with. So stay tuned. We've got some cool conversations coming up.
Awesome. We'll make sure to link that, and we'll link your lighters and the stuff that you're doing with Zippo. We'll link that in the show notes. So if everybody's watching, just click through and you can check out the work Justin's doing, man.
I will get you a custom Manlihood discount code so that your listeners can get a little bit of family love. So.
Hey, that's awesome. Yeah, we'll share that in there. So thanks, man.
Yeah, certainly.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you being on the show, and look forward to our next conversation. Next time you're in town, make sure you message me. We'll get lunch or something, okay?
100%. I will do that. I'm hopeful that this continues to be positive momentum with Zippo. So I anticipate a few more long weekends and in the near future. So I'll certainly get a hold of you.
Awesome. Sounds good, man. Thank you.
Certainly.
This is the Manlihood ManCast.
Are you in need of marketing help for your business or nonprofit? Do you have a company or organization that is thinking about hiring an in-house staff person to do your marketing, but realizing it's out of the budget to bring on someone with the right skills and experience?
If you need an expert to help you with any of the following:
social media, graphic design, website design, web hosting, public relations, video production, podcast editing, short form video editing, email marketing, search engine optimization, content marketing, grant writing,
Grand River Agency is here to help you amplify your message and get it in front of the right people.
Visit us on the web at grandriver.agency.
Justin, as always, I really appreciate you, man. Thank you for hanging out with me for a little while and sharing your perspective on the world. I know we don't always agree on everything, but you know what? I really appreciate you, and I appreciate the way you see the world and the work that you put into making the world a better place, man. Thank you. For the rest of you guys that are out there listening, I want you guys to make sure that you join the Manlihood Man Cave, which is our private Facebook group where we help each other become even better men. All you got to do is type in Manlihood Man Cave on Facebook, and you can send a request, and we'll get you in the group. Also, leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. We need to make up for the fact that our feed got deleted and we had to reset it, and we lost all of our ratings and reviews. So please, go help us spread the word about the Manlihood ManCast. Anyway, guys, as always, I love you, I'm proud of you, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Manlihood ManCast. If you want to be a better husband, father, leader, a better man, you need to join our private Facebook group, the Manlihood Man Cave. Join today. Please help us out with a like, comment, share, and subscribe. And check us out at manlihood.com.